Ben Gibbard, lead singer of the Seattle band Death Cab for Cutie, croons these words on the opening track of the band's breakthrough album, Transatlanticism. He sings, "So this is the new year, and I don't feel any different." And I totally agree with Death Cab. I feel this way too. In fact, I've never really understood the anticipation surrounding the new year. While it is turning a symbolic page on the 12 months prior, there's no magic wiping the slate clean with the stroke of midnight. Whatever 2020 was, let's call it either a learning experience at best or just downright horrific at worst. Whatever it was, our situations, our circumstances, our experiences, our feelings, they didn't really end on Thursday night. Which is why this line, "I don't feel any different," why it resonates with me so deeply. What I did, how I lived prior to December 31st, it carried over to the next day. Nothing started over. I guess I should add this as well. Whatever we were as a people, it certainly didn't get much better, as yesterday's riot at the Capitol demonstrated. Now, I don't say this to nullify any attempted changes that you're trying to make with the new year. I'm not anti-resolution. Actually, I have some of my own. But I would add, it's our decision every day who we want to be, what we want to do, how we want to live. It's my decision, for example, to be the best version of myself. It's my decision to be a person of deep commitment. It's my decision to structure my life around the things that are actually life-giving. It's my decision to love others and take risks and advocate for the marginalized, to defend my family and to challenge those who I love if the circumstances call for it. It's my decision to be a good husband and a good father. And none of that is dependent upon the change of the year. Likewise, the experiences of 2020, they did not dissipate when Thursday turned into Friday. The train wreck that we thought 2020 was, and it was, have very much carried over to 2021, at least in the first 7 days. Also for us on a personal level, there is still grief. There's also still joy, but still confusion, still hope. All of these things continue on. So yeah, this is the new year, and I don't feel any different. It makes sense to me. However, with all deference and much appreciation for Mr. Gibbard and his band's role in the further development of the Seattle sound, I think that his and my attitude toward the new year can be a bit nearsighted. I don't feel any different, but I am different. And so are you. Every single day, this change is happening. This is actually pretty obvious, but humor me for a moment as I provide an example. A few years ago, Dutch artist and filmmaker Frans Hofmeister released a time-lapse video of his daughter, whose name I believe is pronounced Lot. The viral film consisted of short, weekly video fragments that were shot against the same backdrop over the course of many years and then spliced together. Hofmeister released the first video when Lot was 12, and it captured, again, a few seconds from each week of her life in front of the same backdrop for the first 12 years of her life. And now the time-lapse video has continued on, and it provides a bird's eye view, not just of the first 12 years, but of his daughter's first 20 years. When we watch this video, especially as parents, it completely wrecks us, because what we are forced to watch is how change happens, and also happens so quickly, in the blink of an eye. Now, I assume if you asked Lot at any point in this video if she felt different from day to day or week to week, maybe even from month to month or year to year, that she'd probably say, no, not really. But when you watch a video like this, where all of this change, all of this growth, all of this development, where it's just happening right in front of our eyes, we see that this process is ongoing, whether she feels it or not, whether we as parents can identify it or not. All of this change is taking place. So Gibbard sings, "This is the new year and I don't feel any different." And it's true, but only if our perspective is limited. If it's measuring change by how we feel in small increments of time. There's little difference between me on December 31st and then me on January 1st or January 3rd or January 7th, which is part of the reason why I don't feel any different. But when we consider the time-lapse video of our life, and when we see the stark contrasts that are evident when we compare various stages of our development against other stages, perhaps then we will realize that the line, "I don't feel any different," that really it sells our development a bit short. It's happening, whether we feel it or not, whether we notice it or not. We are changing into a different version of ourselves all the time. Now, I have no Bible for us to consider in this video. We won't do what we usually do, which is take a passage of Scripture and completely dismantle it, place it in its ancient context so that we can apply it for our lives today. We're not going to do that. Instead, I want to invite you into something of a thought experiment. You can think of this as a moment of reflection, maybe even something like a spiritual examine. How have you changed over 2020? What have you learned? How have you grown? What conversations have inspired you, challenged you, encouraged you, empowered you? What situations have changed you? I don't mean these questions to be taken in a partisan way, but what have you learned about yourself by being asked to wear a mask, or by being asked to maintain social distance when in public? What have you learned about yourself in the midst of the racial tensions that dominated our social media feeds this past summer, or in the midst of the political tensions that have divided us? What about yesterday? What about the storming of the Capitol? What did that do to you? We have all had to make decisions this year, decisions that we could not have predicted. We all lived in the midst of difficult situations, whether they are the ones that I've listed above, the kind of global, national, large-scale situations, or whether they're more personal situations of loss, grief, of personal defeat in some way. How have these experiences changed you? And can you tell? Or are you still looking too closely at your life? If you need to zoom out beyond 2020 to get a better contrast, consider how you have developed over the years. Maybe to get perspective, you need to compare yourself now with a previous version of yourself. How have the decisions that you've made this year been different from decisions that you've made in the past? Or how would 18-year-old version of you have fared in 2020? How would they have responded to the situations that we have experienced this past year? I often joke that 18-year-old version of me would be very concerned with the 39-year-old version of me. Those conversations between the two would be fun. Probably because of my profession and just my nerdy interests, I can pretty easily trace much of my development as a Christian. The way that my faith has moved and shifted and grown and changed over the years, especially when it comes to big ideas, big theological ideas. But sometimes I have more difficulty identifying any growth in how these new convictions of mine, how they have changed the actual outworking of my faith, how my current views of, say, the Bible have impacted the man that I am now. And maybe that's similar for you too. So try this. How do you think about Jesus now? Maybe pick a point of contrast in previous years. What do you believe about him now that you didn't previously, or that you didn't in the way that you do now? What about faith? What about the church? What about just Christians in general? How have your beliefs changed over time? And if you feel that they haven't, is this a good thing? Are you proud of that? How do you feel about change in general? Is it a bad thing? Is it a scary thing? Is it something to be avoided? Now, more important than just the ideas that we have of Jesus and the faith and church and Christians and so on and so forth, consider how you live out your convictions now. Is it different? Do you follow Jesus, or are you just believing in Jesus? I think these things are radically different. In one, it's more of a mental assent, and in another, that mental assent to who Jesus is and what he did, that impacts how we live. How do your maybe new or developing ideas and beliefs, how do they impact your life and your decisions and your love of neighbor? It may not feel like much in the day-to-day, but when we back the frame up a bit, we gain some perspective, I think. Now, I certainly don't think that we can say that we aren't any different. We are. We just don't always have the perspective to see it. Now, if the new year is good for anything, I believe it's good for introspection, maybe for some added resolve to try to make personal changes, maybe for its provision of a convenient opportunity for us to shape how we develop, because as we know, we are developing. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Where do you want to go? When we arrive at 2031 or 2041. These numbers, they don't make sense to me. I remember in 1999 with the Y2K, I remember some of my friends having like bomb shelter things with just shelves of water. Like that seemed like it wasn't too long ago, but now here we are 20 years removed and we're thinking about 2031 and 2041. Oh my goodness! When we arrive at that time, what are the developments that we want to see in our lives? I don't mean health goals and relational goals, vocational goals, although those things are important, but that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, what kind of follower of Jesus do you want to be? And how can you take steps to get there? And TRP, how can we help? As we celebrate 8 years as a church, perhaps it would be meaningful also for us to consider, where do we want to go as a community, as a group of followers of Jesus, as a church, when we arrive at 2031 or 2041, which again, those numbers boggle my mind. When we arrive at that time, what are the developments that we want to see in the life of our church? What kind of followers of Jesus do we want to be, and how can we take steps to get there? The truth is, whether we perceive it or not, change is happening. The thing that we need to consider most is, where is this change taking us?